Penetrating and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, we can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So welcome all. This will be our final Sunday talk of the year 2020. An interesting year it's been in the sense of the curse, may you live in interesting times. There's a sense that this has been a terrible year with the COVID-19 pandemic, race-based killings, severe economic hardship, and an election fraught with false accusations of fraud and corruption. So with this much suffering can come a sense of doom and helplessness. What can I possibly do to help? So I'd like to head towards 2021 by offering reflections on some things that we can give and receive. That is, compassion and loving kindness, or karuna and metta in the Pali language. Recently, as I was preparing for a Dharma discussion on Zoom, the question arose in my mind, what is the difference between karuna, compassion, and metta, loving kindness? I hoped nobody at the discussion would ask me that question because I hadn't studied it, and of course someone did. So I'd like to thank that person because their question led me to explore it further. In Pali, the language of the earliest Buddhist scriptures, compassion and loving kindness are two of the 4 practices or conditions called Brahma Vihara. This term may be translated as excellent, lofty, or sublime states of mind, or alternatively by divine abodes. And I'm describing them as practices because as human beings, we carry the seeds of these conditions, and as with seeds, they grow and flourish as we cultivate them. The late, and I'm sorry for the pronunciation, Neoponika Thera, a German-born monk in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, says of the Brahma Viharas, these attitudes are said to be excellent or sublime because they are the right or ideal way of conduct towards living beings. They provide the answer to all situations arising from social conflict. They are the great removers of tension, the great peacemakers in social conflict, and the great healers of wounds suffered in the struggle of existence. They level social barriers, build harmonious communities, awaken slumbering magnanimity, revive joy and hope, and promote human brotherhood against the forces of egotism. Those are extraordinary words of aspiration, which point to a simple truth. With our own practice, we can alleviate suffering for ourselves and others. Even social science research, as well as my personal experience, has shown that compassionate thought, speech, and behavior is, quote, contagious, spreading outwards to one's friends, and their friends. And so you can think of a time when you have witnessed compassion and its effect in opening your heart. Neoponika Thera continues, the Brahma Viharas are called abodes because they can become the mind's constant dwelling places, where we feel at home and not remain merely places of rare and short visits soon forgotten. They are also known as the boundless states because in their perfection and their true nature, they should not be narrowed by any limitation as to the range of beings towards whom they are extended. They should be non-exclusive and impartial, not bound by selective preferences or prejudices. A mind that has attained to that boundlessness of the Brahma Viharas will not harbor any national, racial, religious, or class hatred. And I'll mention again that there are 4 Brahma Viharas. Compassion and loving kindness are 2 of them. Sympathetic, joy, and equanimity are the other 2. So now, back to the difference between compassion and loving kindness. The online encyclopedia of Buddhism that I consulted defines karuna, or compassion, as the wish to remove harm and suffering, and metta, loving kindness, as the wish to bring about the happiness and well-being of others. This is a subtle difference of state of mind in making an offering, and we can look at it in greater detail. So beginning with compassion, Nyapanika Thera says, "The world suffers, but most men have their eyes and ears closed." And I'm using the gender language that's used in the writing that I'm quoting. It was done some time ago, and men refers to human beings. Most men have their eyes and ears closed. They do not see the unbroken stream of tears flowing through life. They do not hear the cry of distress continually pervading the world. Their own little grief or joy bars their sight and deafens their ears. Bound by selfishness, their hearts turn stiff and narrow. Being stiff and narrow, how should they be able to realize that only release from selfish craving will effect their own freedom from suffering? Or in the words of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, too much self-centered thinking is the source of suffering. Compassion is a skillful response to suffering. We recently celebrated the festival of the Buddha's enlightenment, and the first sermon given by the Buddha after his great enlightenment included the teaching of the 4 noble truths: suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path to that cessation. The first truth is that all life is subject to suffering. If the word suffering seems too strong, the Pali word for it, dukkha, can also be translated as dissatisfaction, discontent, or dis-ease. This morning we recited the scripture of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, and Avalokiteshvara is the Bodhisattva of compassion. This scripture lists a variety of potential sufferings: falling from a mountain, threatened by an executioner, snakes, scorpions, curses, interminable pain, and in each case, the scripture points the sufferer towards great compassion for healing. Avalokiteshvara regards the cries of the world and does not herself take on that suffering, instead expressing compassion in whatever form will help the being. She is often pictured with 1,000 eyes to see those in distress and 1,000 arms with which to help. Nyapanika continues, "The compassion of the wise person does not render him a victim of suffering because his heart does not waver. Unchanged it remains, serene and calm." How else should we be able to help? We're moved at the sight of suffering. I've been saddened by numerous close-up photos of COVID-19 patients in intensive care, hooked up to ventilators and other lines, tubes, and devices, surrounded by healthcare workers resembling aliens from a space movie. Yet it doesn't help anyone if I absorb their suffering and make it, quote, mine, unquote. Instead, I can accept that suffering exists, and I can offer the compassionate wish that these beings may be free from suffering, free from pain and fear. And so I recite that silently when I see photos of people suffering in hospitals or in war zones or in economic distress. May this person be free from suffering. May they be free from fear and anxiety. And may they have what they need. So compassion is the heart's wish for the cessation of suffering for all beings, including oneself. What distinguishes metta, which is usually translated as loving kindness, from karuna, compassion, is that compassion focuses on suffering with the wish for freedom from suffering, while metta's focus is on loving kindness or the wish for well-being. However, another Theravada Buddhist monk, Thanissaro Bhikkhu, says, metta is not necessarily an attitude of loving kindness. It's more an attitude of goodwill, wishing another being well. The Metta Sutra encourages us to wish, may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be. Thanissaro Bhikkhu continues, this understanding of metta is borne out in the Pali Canon, first of all, in the word itself. The Pali Canon is the collection of the earliest Buddhist scriptures. The Pali language has another word for love, pima, whereas metta is related to the word mitta, in Sanskrit, mitra, friend or friendliness. Thanissaro Bhikkhu tells this story of his teacher. Ajahn Fuang, my teacher, once discovered that a snake had moved into his room. And this is in Southeast Asia, I believe, or South Asia. Every time he entered the room, he saw it slip into a narrow space behind a storage cabinet. And even though he tried leaving the door to the room open during the daytime, the snake wasn't willing to leave. He found a comfortable place. So for 3 days, they lived together. Ajahn Fuang was very careful not to startle the snake or make it feel threatened by his presence. But finally, on the evening of the 3rd day, as he was sitting in meditation, he addressed the snake quietly in his mind. He said, look, it's not that I don't like you. I don't have any bad feelings for you. But our minds work in different ways. It would be very easy for there to be a misunderstanding between us. Now, there are lots of places out in the woods where you can live without the uneasiness of living with me. And as he sat there, spreading thoughts of metta to the snake left. And to me, that's a wonderful example of considering the welfare of others in addition to one's own. I like that it would be very easy for there to be a misunderstanding between us. I don't think I'd want to have a misunderstanding with a snake in Southeast Asia, but there we go. It would be difficult for me to develop and cultivate loving thoughts toward a snake. However, I would certainly wish it no harm, and indeed, I'd wish it well. In other words, goodwill or benevolence. And this is true with other beings in addition to snakes. So I like this idea of metta as goodwill. Other schools of Buddhism include formal meditation practices for cultivating compassion and loving kindness or goodwill. Although we don't do this as part of our formal meditation practice, I find it helpful in spare moments, lying in bed at night before sleep, for example, to offer compassion by silently repeating phrases such as, "May those with COVID-19, for example, be free from suffering. May they be free from fear and anxiety. May their hearts be peaceful." Sometimes I use a rosary, turning a bead with each repetition. In studying the Book of Joy over this past year, I learned that Archbishop Desmond Tutu suffers from insomnia, and he uses periods of insomnia to think of all the people around the world who at that very same moment find themselves unable to sleep, and he prays for them. In our tradition, of course, we'd offer compassion or merit. And I have periods of insomnia myself, and I found that practice of Archbishop Desmond Tutu's to be very helpful. I see the practice of dedication of merit as a kind of umbrella encompassing both compassion and goodwill. Merit is the good result of virtuous thoughts, words, and deeds, which can be shared with others. In offering merit by way of metta, I like to use phrases with a focus on well-being. May you be joyful, may you be well, may you be at ease. There's a slight difference in focus, although it comes from the same heart. We just completed a transfer of merit ceremony this morning, in which we offered the merit of our offerings of incense, flowers, candles, bows, and chanting of scriptures to all beings, and especially those whose names were listed and read quietly during the ceremony. Every day we can take a few minutes at the beginning of our meditation and offer the merit thereof, whether to specific persons, animals, or the whole planet, or to all beings in all directions. Likewise, at the end of the day, we can offer the merit of that day's practice as we see fit. Just as we offer compassion and goodwill to others, it's necessary to offer them to ourselves as well. We can wish, may I be free from suffering, or may I be joyful and at peace. It may be less difficult to extend these wishes to others, even snakes, than to oneself, so you can start with what works for you. This may sound selfish, however, it's quite the contrary. It's important to accept one's own suffering and recognize one's own inherent goodness in order to be able to accept and recognize them in others. I've dealt for long with a habitually critical and judgmental mind, seeing difficulties everywhere and casting blame for them on myself, others, and life itself. Now I'm beginning to notice that this judgmental mind has actually begun to soften, and I sense a connection between the softening and the practice of offering merit, compassion, and goodwill or loving kindness, both in meditation, at the beginning of a meditation, and in daily life, in spare moments, and in all kinds of circumstances, kitchen cleanup in particular, for example, which includes a lot of people in small spaces, or any activity that involves interaction with others. My habit, when I would hear something that annoyed me, and a voice that I found irritating, heavy footsteps, something like that, someone slurping soup, I'm able to replace the irritated criticism with the wish, May she or he be at ease. May they be joyful. May their heart be at peace. And the mind can't think both, that person should really walk more softly, and may they be well at the same time. So by using the wish, the other slips away. Back to the original question of the difference between compassion and loving kindness. With compassion, we focus on the wish to relieve suffering, and with loving kindness or goodwill, we focus on wishing for well-being. What matters more than the difference is the heart's inherent wish to help all beings. The basis of both compassion and loving kindness is the interconnectedness of all beings within the heart of Buddha, within truth, within awakening, within universal goodness, or however you choose to describe that which is indescribable. All joined together, and yet each in our own way living out the truth. I'm going to end with these lines from the Metta Sutra as a wish for the new year. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the sky and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, may all beings be at ease, whatever living being there may be. Thank you.